Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Welcome to Our Town, the show about Rochester. I'm Danielle Teal. Today we'll be hearing from the mayoral race candidates in our last candidate discussion of the season. Be sure to stick around, you won't want to miss it.
This past month, we've been hosting a series of candidate discussions ahead of the upcoming elections. Today, we'll be wrapping up the series with the mayoral race candidates for City of Rochester. We're joined today by mayoral candidates Britt and Kim Norton. Kim Norton has held the seat as the city's mayor since 2019. Welcome to Our Town, both of you.
Thank you.
So we'll start with you, Britt. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'd like the community to know about your vision for the city if you were to be elected mayor?
Yes, I was born and raised in Rochester, and I went to Catholic school, St. Francis, and graduated from Lourdes High School in 1994. And then I got a history degree at the University of Minnesota, and then started a graduate degree in military history at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. And it was at that time I felt like I didn't necessarily want to go into academia, but I always admired my high school history teachers, so I went back and got a one-year program to get a bachelor's in secondary education. So I taught in Kansas City for 2 years at a charter school, Hogan Preparatory Academy. It was all African American. Then I came back to my hometown, taught it for time at Mayo High School. After that I did apartment management, and then I decided I wanted to be self-employed and began investing in buying and selling real estate in Rochester and Austin, Minnesota, and here I am today. I've been married for 22 years to my high school sweetheart, Kelly. We have 4 children between the ages of 8 and 20, and we've been self-employed for about 15 or 16 years, and Rochester is our hometown. My vision for it is to see it continue as having a small town feel while keeping the sophistication that it's always had because of Mayo Clinic. So I've been successfully self-employed. I've served on the board of numerous nonprofits and charities, and just see an opening to put a local citizen's view into City Hall.
Thank you so much, Britt. And you, Mayor Norton?
So, thank you for the invitation to be here today. I have lived in Rochester for nearly 34 years, raised my family, my 4 children here, and love this community. I've had the opportunity to get very involved from the start when we first moved here in volunteer activities, many nonprofits in the community, did a lot of public service, and then actually helped a couple people run for school board, and decided that I had the same background and information that they did, and I should try to run myself. So I did do 8 years on the school board, ending as the chair of the Rochester Public School Board, and then served in the legislature for 10 years. So my public service to this community is long. After 10 years, I retired and went back and got a master's degree in public policy in preparation for coming back to my community and doing something here in my hometown. Great to be up at the legislature, but the dysfunction was growing and I really wanted to make an impact locally. So I did come back here after that study in energy and leadership. And when Ardell Brady put his resignation in, or said he wasn't going to run again, I put my name in to serve as mayor. So my goal has really been and continues to be making certain that the wonderful life that my family has had here and we all have known in this community, it's a great community, that we can continue to have that moving ahead. So really have focused on sustainability, creating a sustainable and resilient future. Part of my master's study was on livable cities, and so I've had an opportunity to see many around the country and the world, and want Rochester to be a leader in that area, focusing on good government and good governance, and also making sure that we have safe neighborhoods with affordable housing for everyone throughout this whole community. So those are the things I ran on initially. Those things haven't changed. I would also say really rebounding from this pandemic is really going to be my focus moving ahead, because we're living in a different world and our workforce has changed, how we work and where we work has changed, and we really need to look at our city center and the impact that it's having not only here but across the country, and what can we do to help. So I'll stop there and answer any other questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. And we'll go with you and
Sure.
then Brett for this next one. This is a two-part question.
Okay.
Rochester has traditionally had quite a weak mayoral system. If elected as mayor, how do you see yourself working with city council in the decision-making and policy-making process, given the fact that you have been in this tenure for a bit? And secondly, how would you ensure a spirit of mutual respect, collaboration, and dialogue, especially when there are conflicts and disagreements?
Absolutely. Well, we do have what's known as a weak mayor system, and when I ran the first time, and I continue to say, I'm happy to be a strong mayor in a weak mayor system. My history and background for most of my adult life have been working in policy. I think that bodes well for where we need to go as a community as we grow and change. And so I bring to bear that experience I've had up at the Capitol and on school board. And in fact, in school board, for several years, we rewrote the entire policy book. That was one of the challenges that we took on the last 2 years I was on the school board. So I really love policy. I want us to have a policy that represents opportunity for everyone in this community. And I think we're participating in some programs that are going to help us do that, and we're going to continue to have that equity lens as we set policy moving ahead. So to the second half of that was really about the relationship building, and just like up at the Capitol, it is difficult to build relationships across the aisle. It was something I had a reputation for, I was known for, and in fact I have very close relationships that have continued after all those years with of course, school board colleagues, but more importantly to this question, with Republicans and Democrats at the legislature, I was one of those people that was known to be able to work across the aisle and maintain those relationships. In a city governance, it's slightly different. We don't have partisan representation. I was happy to let that go to be able to come back and serve my community. But there are 7 personalities, and when you're in a weak mayor position, you don't get a vote. So you have to work the relationships and have a mutual respect for each other, knowing that just like at the Capitol, just like on the school board, sometimes you're going to disagree, and you may be that only voice that disagrees, but that's okay, because particularly on city council, you might be representing a small wedge of the community. My role as mayor is to represent every voice in the community, which might be somewhat different, but I certainly do and will respect differences of opinions, and then once a decision's made, we need to support that decision and move forward together.
Thank you, Kim. For you, Britt, again, traditionally, the weak mayor system. If elected mayor, how do you see yourself working with the city council in decision-making and policy-making process? And secondly, how would you navigate mutual respect, collaboration, and dialogue, especially when there are conflicts and disagreement?
I would say that my view of the role of mayor is different than Mayor Norton's, and I would say it's different than Mayor Brady's was. I've said before that I see it sort of as a synthesis of the two. I would not be policy driven as mayor. I would much more so see myself as the voice and the advocate for the people. As I've campaigned, so many times what citizens convey to me is they say, we don't think our voice is getting into City Hall, like these things are happening and we don't agree with them. So that is the primary role that I would look to play, not a policy role or a new idea role, kind of a voice of the citizens. And so in regard to disagreements on the council or dealing with relationships, it's something that I've done my whole life, from when I was a teacher to when I was a manager to when I'm in my business now. I constantly deal with people, and so I've been very successful at relationship building across a wide breadth of different situations through, like I said, through nonprofits and other things, and so I would just rely on the skills that I've had in the past, and but really everything I would do would be seen through the lens of those citizen voices, because that is probably the number one thing, lack of voice, that I've encountered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you both. So we know that the next few years are going to be really important with regard to continuing to recover from the pandemic, both on the global scale, but certainly in the local level. What would you specifically recommend as mayor with regard to ensuring a continued successful rebound and recovery for our local economy and businesses?
Yes, I think, had I been in charge during the pandemic, I would have done things differently. I've tried on the campaign trail not to go back and try to refight all of the battles of the pandemic. But I think when I talk to business owners, this is a huge, they are still stinging from what happened. And, and some of it was unavoidable and some of it could have been done differently as it was in other parts of the country. But when I talk to people, and I was just talking to someone building a new apartment building yesterday, and they expressed to me dismay at the difficulty in dealing with the city. They're like, I have my financing, I have my plan, I have my contractors and subcontractors, and yet I'm still facing impediments from the city. And so I would be, again, an advocate as the week mayor, but advocating for talking to speaking with business owners and then coming back to City Hall, city staff, and making these points clear. I think getting government out of the way, not new programs, but basically removing any government-created obstacle to business is key to getting business back on track. And along with that comes lower taxes and spending less. I think a lot of business owners feel like they're paying these increased taxes, but they're not reaping any benefit from them. Taxes going up year after year. As a property owner, I see this, almost exponentially going up. Property taxes, in some cases, doubling in 3 or 4 years. So that's a huge, sometimes I think there's a disconnect between City Hall and business people about what it takes to actually get a business off the ground and keep it growing. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for you, Kim, the next few years will be an important time as a city and the world recover from the pandemic. What would you specifically recommend, if reelected, with regard to ensuring a continued successful rebound and recovery for local businesses and our economy?
Well, that question is really the focus for the next year plus. I've had the opportunity, because I have some relationships with other mayors, we've had an opportunity recently to gather and discuss the changing look for businesses and for city centers. And we know that there's going to be more work from home. We know that in our own community, when Mayo Clinic is not bringing everyone back to their office, that there is an impact on our local businesses. So not only are they rebounding from the pandemic, they're also going to have to struggle with what does downtown, the city center, look like different than it was before. So there are things we can do. We're watching the trends. There are relationships that I've built over the years and continue to work with the Rochester Area Chamber, with RDA, the downtown organization, to see what can we do together to address the needs. And government can't solve all the problems, but it can be there to help. And so there are some things that we're looking at to help, particularly people who are impacted most heavily by the pandemic. We did apply for the Global Mayor's Challenge and won that, and that is going to allow us to help build a workforce for the future. Because we are a growing community, we know that development and construction are going to continue for many years into the future. We need a workforce to do that. So we're building off that, and actually I'm working with a number of nonprofits and the Chamber and Ready and other organizations downtown to try to build out the entrepreneurship aspect of businesses, because we know the vast majority of people in town, if they don't work for Mayo Clinic, which many of them do, are also small business owners and have very small niche businesses, and we need to continue to grow that. As we get people into the workforce, for instance, with the Global Mayor's Challenge grant, we want them to be able then to own those businesses when they're done. So this entrepreneurship effort that we're working on here this next year in particular is going to be very important, I think, to our continued success as a community.
Thank you, and this is a good segue into DMC. Are you ready for this? Okay, as mayor, you sit on the DMC Corporation Board along with City Council President. In this role, how would you work to continue to ensure the local community voices and the input of the City Council body as a whole are engaged in the process early on?
Absolutely, and that really it calls to two things. One is the importance of understanding the DMC legislation, which ultimately puts the City Council as the final arbiter of everything. So the Destination Medical Center EDA can come up with ideas, other developers can come up with ideas and bring them, but ultimately it is the City Council that has the vote to say yay or nay. So we do have representation, as you mentioned, with the council president. The county has one spot on that board, and the mayor has a role on that board. And so we can question the developers or the DMC EDA about, is this the right thing for our community? Have you considered, in fact, one of the things we did push for that we got was the DMC to pay for the sidewalk repairs downtown. Our sidewalks were horrible. They needed repair, and so we worked with the DMC to say, you know, it's not just all about for Mayo Clinic, because we hear that a lot in the community. This DMC is only for Mayo Clinic. It isn't. And it has to be centered on the Mayo Clinic's success, of course. That's what it was founded to do, but also the success of the whole community and make sure everyone that lives here is enjoying and reaping the benefits of that collaborative approach. And that's the second point, which is the collaborative approach. DMC and the city have both really stepped into this co-design idea, really bringing the community to bear. We hear, you know, as has been mentioned, not everyone gets what they want in a community. That's part of a democracy. Some people don't get what they want, some people do. But we're trying to bring every voice and make sure every voice from all across this community is represented through this co-design process. And so that is something else that I think we really have to do moving ahead, is make sure that co-design is continued to be used so that the ideas of the programs, the plans, and I would even argue city policy is centered around the community.
Thank you. All right, Britt, what are your thoughts about DMC, the role of the mayor, and leveraging community voices?
Yes, I see, again, because of this is kind of an advocacy, bully pulpit style job in mayor that I see, and I see big issues with DMC on the campaign trail. Generally negative, and the people feel like DMC is for Mayo only, especially because it sort of focuses in that green zone downtown. And when they see things like no swimming pools for their children, and then they see $20 million for Discovery Walk, they start to think maybe a benefit that would have been good for the entire community and for Mayo Clinic, because Mayo Clinic benefits from everything good that happens in Rochester, that the money could be, that it could be changed, the legislation could be modified to how the money is spent. In regard to citizens participating, yes, the city council does have the say-so. I would see my role there using the veto pen, and in order to slow down some of the legislation, then you need the 5-2 supermajority to keep it moving. And I've talked with citizens on the campaign trail about this, and they think that that would add a nice dynamic to not just have the council, the mayor, the city staff, everybody rubber stamping everything for DMC. The co-designer process I've tried to learn about because people have been talking about it, and Patrick Sieb was telling me about it. But to me, it seems like there's a lot of work to be done there. It might be useful in some way, but right now with so few people participating, you can't get a good sample, and it's a little bit, there's a little bit of a lack of transparency right now of how exactly it works. I think it's one of those things that sounds good on paper, but sounds good in a presentation, but in terms of, you know, the real world, I think there's a lot of question marks about it still. So I think DMC, there's a lot of work to do, a lot of wood to chop on DMC. Thank you.
Thank you both. So in previous debates and interviews, you each have shared differing views on the future of energy and sustainability in our city. Over the last several months, we've seen fossil fuel prices, costs rise, and we've also know that renewable energy will also provide an additional cost. So if elected, how would you work specifically to support those individuals and businesses in our community struggling with higher energy costs, regardless of the source, while also protecting and preserving our environment?
Mm-hmm. I think this is a huge question, and almost all of our economic woes right now are tied to energy. Energy affects the price of everything you do, from your groceries to heating your home. So everything is tied to energy. So affordable energy is what built our prosperity. So what I would do to help those people, you have to talk about the source. I've done a lot of research into this. I've talked to a lot of experts, and right now with the way our culture and our economy is, renewable energy from solar and wind is never going to provide any more than 7%, unless you can tolerate rolling blackouts. Solar is 1/8 of the time, wind is 3/8, I think. And so I think this is a critical, this isn't just like a talking point, like, oh, I'm against green energy. I'm being realistic, and I want citizens to know, as you're mentioning, how this will affect their life. You're talking about a drastic change, and it's one thing to set those goals, but it's another thing to completely ignore all the progress we've made with fossil fuels, how much cleaner our coal-burning power plants are, how clean natural gas is, the opportunity to use these micro nuclear reactors. There's all sorts of other options that will keep our prosperity and keep our abundance. But renewable energy, as we're finding out now, and as Europe is finding out, especially Germany, who we had a very close relationship with regarding this, we're finding out it is an unmitigated disaster. Production cost is up over 70% in Germany, and it's all due to a lack of reliable energy, no matter where it comes from. So I think this is a huge, what I would say to people is we have to accept reality. It's one thing to set a goal, it's another thing to pay the bill. So thank you.
Britt. And to you, Kim, we know energy costs money. What would your commitments be around supporting those who are struggling with higher energy costs while also protecting and preserving our environment?
Well, a couple things we can do right off the bat is make sure that the buildings that we build now and into the future are energy efficient. Setting good standards for buildings so that we don't pass on, for instance, in an apartment complex, if an apartment complex is built cheaply, those energy costs get passed on to the people who live in the apartment, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So yes, we have challenges right now across the country. I would debate and argue some of the points that were just made, but I'm not going to waste my time doing that right now. But I will say RPU, which is the city's energy company, is very comfortable moving ahead, has voted already to move ahead with 100% renewable energy. They are going to do it, they can do it, and they are planning for it. They are experts in this area, and I'm not going to try to second guess them. And also the City Council, in hearing their report and their advice, also adopted a move to 100% renewable. Energy is costing a lot everywhere in the world, including, as has been pointed out, in Germany. Germany is fortunate that they have so much renewable energy that the impact of the war on Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, that's impacting access to fuel across Europe and across the world, actually, is mitigated to some small effect already because they are moving ahead on renewable energies. And yes, there is a cost of producing all energy, and I would argue that some of the fossil fuels and the gas that we all use is already subsidized, so it's really no different for this new type of energy. So I will stand behind my position that we as a world need to address climate change. We need to address the negative impacts on the world, countries, islands, our own borders around our own country. Our cities that live on those are being affected negatively, and we all have to support each other by doing the right thing to try to mitigate it as best we can. So I'll end there.
All right, closing question, 1 minute.
Closing question.
You ready, Britt?
All right.
Kim? Okay.
Speed round.
Well, we'll go with you for this
Okay,
one.
sure.
And finally, what makes you best suited for the position of mayor? And share a little bit more about that. 1 minute.
Yes, I think what makes me a good candidate to be a mayor is I am a very deep stakeholder in the city to start with. So I'm raising my family here, I'm running my business here, but I also have a broad work experience and broad education. And what that brings to the table is that practical knowledge, the common sense, the thinking outside the box, not having been a government employee or an elected official. I don't have those kind of institutional memories of that would keep me from thinking of some new way to solve a challenge or problem. And so I think the fact that when you add these things together, I think it makes an attractive package of someone who will bring a fresh view and a fresh look to solving the city's problems.
Thank you, Britt.
Thank you.
And Kim, what makes you best suited for continuing to be mayor?
Well, I would hope experience is at the top of the list. I've been representing this community in a variety of fashions, whether it be volunteer, school board member, legislator, or mayor for a number of years. And it's politicians aren't one size fits all. We are, in fact, your friends and neighbors that live right next to you or down the street. That's what we do in this democracy is we elect someone amongst our peers who can represent us. That's what I've done. I've been proud of the work I've done. I've been honored to be able to be a representative of this community, having been mayor now for 4 years during very, very difficult times. I hope I'm given the opportunity to be able to utilize the experience in policy, the relationships I've built in many sectors across this community, and my desire to make Rochester a really wonderful place, not only a wonderful history, but a wonderful future, and hoping I have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you, Britt. Thank you both
Thank
for
you.
joining us today. And thank you to the audience for being with us. We have heard from the mayoral candidates. It's been wonderful to hear where they stand on some of the issues. From 125 Live, we will see you next week on Our Town, the show about Rochester.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.